at the root of a lot of
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in this world. My name is Leslie Gomez, your award-winning published personal brand photographer and visibility coach. I am thrilled to welcome you to another exciting episode of Blazers Brilliance Podcast. And I have with me my fantastic guest, Elaine Blackwood, who is an employment attorney and executive coach. So let's get ready for a session filled with authentic stories and powerful insights that will leave you feeling inspired and ready to conquer. So this isn't just a podcast, it's your weekly dose of motivation and transformation. So let's get into it and let's make today brilliant. So welcome, Elena, to the Blazers and Brilliance podcast. Do me a favor and just introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Sure. As you pronounce my name perfectly, some people don't.
Can you unmute yourself maybe? I can't hear you.
You can't. I'm not on mute. Did you hear me before?
Elena?
Yes?
Let's see. Let's see what's going on here.
I'm not on mute.
Give me a second here.
Sure.
Not sure. Can you say something, Elena?
Sure. Can you hear me?
No, I cannot hear you at all.
I don't know what's happening.
Up here. Hold on just a second, Elena.
My sister says she can hear me now.
Can you say something now?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Hi, Elena.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Hi.
Hi.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me? I'm calling you on.
We are just having a little difficulty, so just bear with us right now. Hello?
I'm on my phone with you.
Yeah, but I can't hear you on the streaming. I can't hear you at all.
But my sister heard me. She's on.
Oh, maybe it's me.
I think so.
Let me figure this out.
And I'll hang up the phone now because that's the echo.
Yeah. Let's see. How about now, Elena?
You want me to talk again?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. We're on.
Were you able to hear my introduction, or do I need to say that again?
I heard your introduction.
Okay, perfect. So now we're ready, guys. Technical difficulties, but we're here. Elena, just introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Okay, I'll do that. I'm Elaine Blackwood, and thank you for pronouncing my name so perfectly. A lot of people don't. I am by background actually an employment lawyer. I have taken cases from both sides of the fence, employees suing employers, employers getting sued. And what I found was at the root of it were a lot of misunderstandings. So I morphed into workplace investigations. And what I do is I go into organizations and I look into their problems. And I'm going to give you an example of when people call me in. Say there's an issue in the workplace of something like harassment, because that's a big thing these days. And the person who is accused of harassing is high up in the organization. Mm-hmm. They don't want somebody below them in the organization investigating their boss, basically. So they call in somebody from the outside like me. So I go in and I tell the organization the truth. You're going to be stuck with my findings, whether you like them or not. And some companies say, that's okay. which means they don't really want to know what's going on. And I work with the ones who say, yeah, tell us, and we can take it on the chin. So that's what I do. I'm the one who comes in from the outside. I have no stake, no dog in the fight. I'm not advocating for anybody. I just want to tell the organization what's happening and what they can do to fix it. So that's what I do. And what I found also, and this is how I morphed into the executive coaching, a lot of the time when there's been an investigation, somebody's done something at the workplace that maybe they shouldn't, they need coaching. To just say, oh, you shouldn't have done that at the end, they're still there with the same mindset that caused them to make the mistakes in the first place. So what I did is I started coaching people, lots of different kinds of people, and I found I loved that aspect of it. Actually heading things off at the pass before they blow up into litigation or investigations. So that's what I do a lot of these days. And I've had so many interesting clients, so many interesting investigations. I'll be happy to talk to you about some of them.
Sure. Well,
Okay.
in our previous conversations, I was just so intrigued at what you did, and it was different because as I was an employee in a corporate, and when people got in trouble, it was either a write-up and the retraining is you do 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
But what I like about you and what kind of sets you apart is that you go in and you find these findings, then you coach this individual, not with this one time, but for I don't know how long, maybe a series of months to make sure that they understand their behavior and what they can do differently. So I really, really like that you do that and not that one thing, slap on the wrist, and you need to do 1, 2, and 3 to fix this. So I appreciate it.
Oh, I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No worries. So,
and I have to tell you, because of my background, I'm used to getting people to talk to me because that's what I get paid for. And so now the switch is flipped. So this is kind of interesting for me. I actually have a colleague who does coaching, and she's about 5 feet tall. And she says, I make grown men to cry. I put them in a room and we work for 9 hours and they're crying at the end of it. That's not my idea of coaching. That's not how I coach. If you want somebody like that, that's fine. But what I do is I actually work with people. Who you are, this is what's gone wrong. And a lot of people don't know what's gone wrong in the workplace. I had one person, he was a CEO of a multinational organization, a luxury brand. And he said, nobody ever sat down and told me this. So when I do my coaching, I lay a groundwork for the basic laws they're supposed to abide by and their policies. And then we start going into it. This is what happened. This is why things blew up on you. This is what your personality is like, because sometimes that has an effect both on how people behave and how they're perceived. And I have a question to ask you, Leslie.
Yes.
What I see of you is a kaleidoscope. Is that supposed to be the case? So everybody just looks at me?
A kaleidoscope? Like
right now? I don't see your face.
Oh, I'm not sure.
That's okay. If other people can see it.
Oh, let's make sure my video is on here.
Just me. That's okay. We can keep going. Uh-oh. Leslie? Well, I can talk a little bit more about what I do. That's okay. Let's just leave it.
All right. So if you can hear me, that's just as fine. But I can see you.
Okay.
And someone just pinged me and said, I can see you both. So let's just carry on. So, Elena, can you tell us more about your early life and the influences that shaped your career choice? So, yeah, like why did you want to be an attorney?
You know, it's kind of interesting. I come from a family, they're immigrants, I have to say. And I remember once seeing somebody saying, in my family, you could be a doctor, a lawyer, or a failure. And our family was just very, they assumed a profession. And so I went with one that was extremely flexible, extremely mobile, that I could do a lot of different things with. And that's what I liked about the law. Just, it's so, there's so many different things, so many avenues one can go down as a
Right.
lawyer. And so
Right.
that was something that really attracted me to it. And like so many people in law, there's so many aspects of it. You get your first few jobs and then you go in the direction of something that's mostly interesting to you. And this is where I landed. There's always such a plot in employment law, I have to say. You think it's going to go one way and it just goes sideways.
Okay.
So
Great.
that's how
So,
those were the early influences. A family that that assumed, and
mhm,
me doing that. What I like today is there's so many different avenues that people can go, and people are less rigid about what they do with their careers. Traditionally, especially I'm going to say it, for a lot of Black people, medicine was something they went to because A, it was a stable profession, and B,
mhm,
because a lot of white doctors wouldn't go into Black neighborhoods and see people. That's the bottom
mhm,
line. They wouldn't touch them. They wouldn't want to go to where they were. And
mhm.
that formed the basis for a lot of Black doctors who knew people weren't going to get health care otherwise. And it's not quite the same with lawyers because you go to your lawyer, you're not sick. But
Mhm.
that was that.
Right.
I think that's the foundation for it. Does that make
Just
sense?
curious. Yeah, that
Sure.
does make sense. That does. Just curious though. You've been in law for how many years, or more than how many years?
Ask how many decades. Sometimes I have to count on my fingers. More than 40 years, I
More
think.
than 40 years. So
Yeah,
I can imagine the experiences that you've had throughout the 4 decades of
yeah.
working as an attorney. One of my questions is because I get a lot of stories about women or just women of color
Mhm.
being the only person in the room or in the boardroom with men.
Yeah,
And you are actually in a male dominated industry. And so am I. So as a
yeah,
photographer, I'm in a male dominated industry and there are challenges and sometimes we have to bully our way around um, to make way for us. Is there any specific experience that you would like to share with us, or if there was an experience, how did you navigate through it? If that makes
there
sense.
are so many experiences that I've had. I look at women today and the pregnancy discrimination laws and things like that. When I got pregnant, my boss said, "I have a business to run." There was no such thing as pumping stations. In my generation, pumping station was a toilet stall with a Dixie cup. And I mean it. I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about. You snuck
Right.
out of meetings for that. And what I see is such an evolution, and it's so encouraging to see women who say, "No, I should be able to take time off. I am entitled to pump milk."
Mhm.
And so I've seen the difference. But what I want to highlight is a bit of a difference in mindset between generations, just in terms of gender disparities and gender hostilities. When I came up, it was blatant. Some of the hostilities, some of the patronizing, but it's different now. What I'm seeing is not so much a discrimination and a glass ceiling, but it's how are women treated when they get to the glass ceiling, when they get up closer to the top of
Right.
echelons. And what I've seen is a lot of it has to do with pay. And when I go into an organization and I write a report, I say, "This is what I'm finding." And what I do is I try to bring color to the report. I don't just say you're paying the women less than the men. I say women talk to me and say, "I watch my male colleagues buy Rolexes and I can't afford that." I was talking to a Black man who said, "I go by and I see the white people looking at houses and I'm in an apartment. I can't afford to buy a house." And I like to bring texture and color and say, we can talk about the law and the dollars and cents, but I also want to say this is how it impacts people. So that's something I've seen. But what I want to say about the gender is I have a friend who's a white woman who has two millennial sons. Neither of them has had anything but a female boss in their careers. And these are young men in their 20s. So we talk about women climbing the corporate ladder and we have a certain perspective of it. The perspective of these young men is different. And what they are seeing, and when I conduct investigations, they're saying, I see my boss being treated differently. And they notice it. And I think we need to access what they have to say and not just go in with our blazing swords thinking things are the way they were when we came up, because we're going to be falling short.
Mm-hmm.
I was stunned by how observant some of these younger men have been in terms of the mansplaining. I had one say, they're asking me and my boss knows more than I do. That's what we're looking at. Those are the nuances. So it's interesting to see how it's still there, but how it's changed.
Right. So you see a shift. And I had another person on a panel discussion that I led in June, and she talked about the things that she experienced of being a woman, the only woman around the table that was managing their finances for a large company. And they would kind of like oversee what she had to say, even though she was the one managing their money and
Yeah.
raising money for their company. So what she told me was that, or told us, was that she had to show in a different way
Yeah.
when sitting around the table. And her being clear on her brand was something that helped her to gain the respect and helping people to understand how knowledgeable and how she was able to do the job very well. How do you see branding
Um,
being a positive? I don't know if it's I would say a positive way of of
yeah,
of
I see.
navigating through this issue that people are talking about when you sit around the table with men and that kind of stuff.
It's I know exactly what you're talking. It's a landmine. And sometimes when I've done coaching, I've been told I have to coach. I'm called to coach a woman. She's the bully. They call her a bully. So I have a cartoon I saw once called "What's the difference between being aggressive and being assertive?" And the caption says your gender. And that's what we're looking at. I know it's a
Mhm.
good one, isn't it? And this is where I get my information. You think, oh, it's not all from legal cases. It's sometimes from real life. And so that's
Right,
what we're
right.
looking at. Women do have to show up differently. And there is a fine line if I'm quote too aggressive, if I say something in a certain way, uh, I'm the bully. And if I don't, I'm too retiring and I get walked all over and I've got tire tracks all over my back. And the thing is to be aware of it. To pretend that it's not there puts you at a disadvantage. So to be aware of it, and that's what coaches are for, to help you navigate that. How am I going to assert myself and still make the points? And it's so interesting. You never know who an ally is going to be. I have a friend who's a partner at a big firm, and she made a point, and the managing partner basically ignored her. And her white male colleague made the point. He said, "That's a good idea." And that
Mhm.
white man said, "She just said that." That's where allies are important, and you never know where you're going to find them. And that's what I mean, that sometimes the younger generation is more observant of things like that. And I don't want to stereotype, and I'm going to
Mhm.
talk about age, whether you
Mhm.
ask it or not. But there are differences in the way things are perceived, in what's noticed. But
I believe that.
yeah. So I
So
just we do have to not say there's no gender discrimination, but it's showing up differently. And
I
to address it the way we addressed it when we were coming up, it's not going to serve us well. You have to see what's here now, and still has to be addressed. Mansplaining still exists all over the
right,
world. Yeah,
right. So you worked not only in the United States, you worked overseas. Tell me, like, where were the two places and what noticeable differences did you notice from being an attorney overseas and being an attorney in the United States? And just kind of elaborate on that a little bit, because I found that very impressive
Thank you.
when I was like reading your bio. So tell us a little bit more about that overseas and your experience with that.
So I did the DEI training for a large multinational organization that had never had it before. And it was in a lot of different countries. And this is the joy of working on my own. And I'll tell you how I ended up doing that at some point. But I said, English is their language. Everybody's supposed to speak English. But I said, the nuances are not going to be there if it's delivered in English. People will nod and say, okay, okay, but they're not going to get to the heart of it. So I wanted my program delivered in different languages. So I insisted that that be done. So I had to find people speaking languages. Mandarin, my program in Mandarin, Cantonese, Korean, Japanese, Italian, French. And then I thought to myself, I have no means of quality control, because I looked at my PowerPoint presentation and I looked at the characters next to it, and I had no idea what it said. And this is where working on your own and saying, I'm just going to go out on a limb and do this is where it comes in. And I said to the woman who's going to deliver the program in Cantonese and Mandarin, I just have to trust that my sister in China is not going to stick it to me. And it was a really powerful experience to watch people absorb it in ways they wouldn't if it weren't delivered to them in their own nuance, their own language, with examples that they got. And little in Korean, what I did is at the beginning of each presentation, I went on and I let them introduce me. And the guy in Korea started playing all this jazz music first. I thought, I've never had anybody play jazz music before one of my presentations. I said, all right, Alex, go for it. And it went very well. So even if you don't understand a language, you can watch the command presence of the person presenting. You can watch the exchange. You can watch people leaning forward, asking questions. Curiosity is the same in any language. And that's something that was important. And you ask, what's the difference? There are certain countries where I put it, they don't feel that race is an issue. And sometimes it's because they only have one race, or very few of another race, or they've basically got their heads buried in the sand. So that's something that I had to recognize and push.
That's very interesting to know that there are countries that don't consider race. And I mean, that is something that's pretty much opened up my eyes in this conversation. You talked about working for a company and then transitioning into working for yourself. But before we get into how you transition into your own or entrepreneurship, were there any self-identity issues that you had to come to grips with during this transition, and knowing that you are starting your own business and that you could be truly who you are at this moment? Because what I find is, and I talked about this on the last podcast, there is something that I call corporate identity theft, which causes us to be muted because some things aren't accepted, or we have to act a certain way when we're working in corporate. We can't even really um, share what we do outside of work at sometimes. And people often take that muted feeling, and when they get to where they can really be themselves and really show what is different about them and what value they bring to the table, they don't know how to do that. Did
It's
you
true.
ever have those feelings?
That was my watershed moment that made me realize that I was going to do this on my own. And I ended up doing a lot better than I would have if I had stayed in an organization. But I'm going to describe this situation for you. I worked for a municipality, and we were recruiting for police officers. So they come in and they have to go through the fitness test. the exercise and see if they're physically fit to be police officers. So as a member of the HR team, I logged them in. And then after they were logged in, I said, I'm taking this test with you. And they had never had anybody from HR do anything like that. So I pulled on, I had my t-shirt on and I was jogging around the track with people and lifting the weights and doing the agility tests. And the chief of police adored it. The other cops adored it. The recruits who maybe would be working with me were telling me, I hope I get to work with you. My boss hated it. She was so pissed. And it was something creative. It was something that I don't think she necessarily would have been able to think of to do. And one day when she was mad at me, she said, and they say you run like a gazelle. I mean, daggers were coming out of her eyes. And I said,
Right.
I knew it would anger her. But I didn't want to hide myself. I didn't want to hide my light under a bushel. And I said, I never want to work any place where I feel like I have to hide, where I can't bring out the spark and the energy. And I didn't. I did it on my own terms. I took my own risk. It was a blast.
I really love that. And once women really get a feel of really honing themselves as a whole and really contributing to their brand, they feel so much more free, right?
Yeah, I do.
Which makes what they do not seem like work, and they can be really true to themselves.
Exactly. And you're smiling. I was running around that track with those recruits, just laughing with them, talking with them. And if I worked with them, I'd be doing more of that with them. And I said, that's the energy I want to bring to my work.
Right. And you will never be forgotten for that. They're always going to remember Elaine Blackwood, the woman who went out and instead of watching us, go through boot camp, she went through boot camp with us. So it really hones in on that saying that, people will forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel.
I hope
And
so.
I'm sure they felt supported at that very moment,
That was the energy I wanted to bring, that they felt that they were going to be supported and understood. I mean, I get it, what it's like to be on that track, encouraging some of them, saying you can do this. It was a great experience. And I want to make sure that my career is filled with that kind of experience, just smiling at the end of it. And a lot of the times it doesn't happen in corporate life. There's a lot of jealousy, and which is the most insidious, damaging emotion there is, as far as I'm concerned. But there's a lot of that, and it's finding like-minded people who can help you weather those storms. That's what we have to do.
Absolutely. Support. Yeah. So now that we talk about support, who has been the most influential mentor or role models in your life, in your career?
They come from left field. And, when you talk about, everybody wants a mentor. And one of the things I advise people or I coach people is, if you go to events sniffing around for a mentor, that's not how it works. It's important that it's organic, that you find a mentor who, in areas that you're interested in, to just say, I'm going to learn to play golf because that's where people go. And if you don't like golf, you're just going to be miserable. And you're going to be hanging out with people who you don't relate to. So it's important to find a cause, a program, an organization that you already like, and then go from there. And that's the best place to find mentors, doing something you already like. And that's where it can grow. You want to hear a story? Because words tell, stories tell. My best friend from college's daughter, and I'm going to put people's race in just for texture, but she's Chinese, and she heard about somebody who was running for office, and she said, I want to work on this person's campaign. and I will do anything. I will sleep on the floor. I will stuff envelopes. I don't care. I'm going to do it. So she quit her job and she went, and she literally started at the ground up. And the person she was, whose campaign she worked on was this man called Barack Obama. Needless to say, she did quite well. But she started it based on something she was already passionate about. And that's how it grew. And it's important that we do things that we're already passionate about, because that's where we're going to find our our happiest place. And I know it doesn't always happen, but to get some kind of passion, and sometimes you work at something that allows you to finance your other passion. But I'm saying
Right.
to have it in your life somehow is so important.
I can definitely resonate with that because I remember I'm a self-taught photographer, but I remember when I did start my photography journey and finding a mentor, obviously I became very passionate about photography. However, I admired this one, he's now my friend, brother, and friendly competitor. Shout out to Keith Calater if you're listening. But, you know, you are right about finding these mentors in places that one, you admire, but two, that you and things that you love to do.
Yeah.
And the third thing is I admired how he showed me as a woman of color the ability to own and run my own business. He was the only photographer of color that I saw that owned his own studio and just had this style of photography that was out of this world
Mm.
and was just doing so well as a entrepreneur. So
Yeah.
he shed some light on something that I didn't even imagine was a possibility. And that's why I wanted him to be my mentor. And I was okay with being, if he told me no, but I was going to be a little bit, not aggressive, but what you call persistent,
Yeah.
persistent. But yeah. So thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah. You know,
Anything else you would like to share or say?
well, about mentors, like I said, you never know where they're going to come, and you never know who your supports will be. I remember having a case once, and it was out in the boonies in Connecticut, and I went out there, and it was the old boys network, and my opposing counsel. So there's a white judge and the white opposing counsel. I thought, oh, well, good luck to me. And at the end of it, the white judge handed opposing white counsel a piece of paper and says, "Withdraw your case." I didn't expect that, and I don't know that I'd call him a mentor, but it's a reminder that we can do things we don't expect sometimes, and we never know who our supports are going to come from. And the flip side
Exactly.
is true. We know that too. You never know who's going to stick it to us. Got to say that. And that's
I
my job. I tell the truth. I remind people.
That's true. Yeah, yeah, you have to. And you know what? I agree with all of what you said that you don't know where your supports to come from because um I have supports from all different races, colors, creeds, religions, and I am truly grateful for that because I get to hear what different perspectives
Oh,
coming from different cultures and being able to have the ability to accept what I want to about it, right?
I, I think it's extremely important to have perspectives other than your own,
Yep.
in terms of coaching, in terms of
Hmm.
whatever you're doing. I remember I was talking to somebody about working with somebody. She says, "Oh, well, let's find a Black woman for you." And I said, "I don't need a mini me. I mean, it's nice to have somebody who understands and gets things, but it's also nice to have somebody who can show me a perspective that I hadn't even thought of." And sometimes
Absolutely.
when I conduct investigations, just showing up as who I am makes a difference in terms of how I connect to people, how I relate to people. I remember doing one in Australia. It was a Chinese woman complaining of race discrimination. And first we went on Zoom, and she looked at me and she said, "Oh, they're taking it seriously." And I knew exactly what she meant, but I didn't say anything.
Mm-hmm.
And she started
Mm-hmm.
talking, and she had tears in her eyes, and she said, she'd moved way up in the company. She was vice president, and she said, they don't, they tell me they don't think of me as Asian. And she said, that means they don't want to look at me. They don't see me. Do you know what I mean? And I said to her, I don't know what you're talking about. And she burst out
Mm-hmm.
laughing, and I burst out laughing. And just the connection was there. And sometimes just
Yeah.
being who you are and not holding back. And the flip side is, I know of an Asian woman who was investigating someone Black, and the person said, you don't know what it is to be a Black person. And this woman didn't say, oh, I understand. She said, no, I don't. Help me understand. And that's what cracked it for them. So to just be who you are and don't hold back, it's very important.
And I think those conversations are important also. I like her response. I don't know, because that was true, but
Yeah.
help me. Give me insight on what that looks like or sounds like or what that is, right? So, yeah.
No. I've just heard, oh, I understand what it's like when I go outside, my hair gets frizzy. I heard of a white person saying that. I'm thinking, no. So you never know.
So I I agree. I agree. You just never know. So what kind of legacy do you hope to leave through your work? And I have a couple more questions after that too.
Okay. The legacy, I'm planting those trees under whose shade I'm not going to sit. The legacy I'd like to leave is that people's eyes are open. When I was talking to an international client, I said, how do you teach people to see? Because that's our job. That's what we're doing. And
Yes.
when I've coached people, I've said, how did things go? And I've heard, he's so much more intentional. He thinks before he talks now. One of his coworkers came to HR and said, what happened to him? He's so nice. He's just changed. And that's the legacy I'd like to leave. But that comes with ongoing work. It's not going to come from a one and done. Or I don't have that. It's the ongoing, the trust you build up. It's a sense of humor that you can develop and safety with the person you're coaching. And that takes time. I mean, I have examples on that too.
Yeah,
I
no, you're right. And that's again another reason why I was so intrigued at when you said you were an executive coach. It was so much different than what I'm used to when people say they're an executive coach.
Yeah.
And which leads to my next question is, what advice, or give me a minute to think of the question kind of slipped my mind in terms of uh
I think
go
I
ahead.
think I know part of what you're saying is the
Yeah.
whole idea of often I'm called in because somebody's done something wrong at work.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people just leave it at that. But I take it to the next step and say, okay, we're not going to just talk about what you did, quote, wrong. We're going to talk about going forward and how you evolve both as a leader.
Right.
How the insights you're going to get. And that's the part I love. And
Now I remember the question.
Okay. I figured if we started talking in that direction, you would.
Right. So how important do you think, or would you say that if you are in executive leadership, how important is it that they should have a coach or a mentor? or I would say coach instead of mentor?
Quite frankly, so much is asked of leaders today. I don't know how they
Mhm.
live without coaches.
Right.
I get all these articles from Harvard Business Review and Wharton and New York Times, everything. You have to be a good listener. You have to be empathetic. You have to be decisive. You have to this, and I don't know how they can do it all. You have to know all about DI. You have to be aware and comfortable with different kinds of people. It's too much to do. And sometimes somebody just needs a safe place where they can bat things around and say, let's nosh out this situation at work. It's not that I'm giving them advice, I'm helping them formulate their own decisions and their own approaches. But they need somebody. They need to let their hair down someplace and be comfortable. And the people I coach best are the people who have the sense of safety so that we can actually laugh together. And I'm gonna give you an example. I was coaching a the president of a white male executive president of a multinational company, and this was during Zoom. I mean, COVID had just hit; everything was on Zoom, so we'd had a really heavy discussion. So towards the end of our session, he said, "Elaine, I have something important to ask you." And I said, "Of course." And he said, "What's your cat's name?" And I didn't know that my cat had been, I guess, walking back and forth. And we both just hooted. And I thought, these are the people I want to work with. People I can just laugh with
Right.
from the gut from and who can let their hair down. And that's where I am with the coaching.
Perfect. What type of um, organizations do you work with or looking to work with? And how could they find you?
I never know. Um, I usually get my referrals from large law firms. I've gotten some from LinkedIn. I never know. And I've had such a variety. I've been called in to coach rabbis who made homophobic comments, and I remember thinking, "Are we going to relate?" It was wonderful.
Mhm.
Um, Women accused of being bullies, and you know about that cartoon. Um,
Mhm.
just there's such a variety, and the issue isn't a particular topic or a particular type of person. The issue is the willingness, the curiosity to learn, the willingness and eagerness to expand and say, "Oh, uh, let me grow myself." And that's what I'm looking for in a
You're looking
client.
for. So,
Yeah.
if someone wanted to work with you, what is your website or I'm sure they
Oh,
can find you on LinkedIn under your name, Elena Blackwood, and it's not with the A, it's with an E at the end. So Elaine
yes.
Blackwood. But what is your website if they wanted to learn more about you or if they wanted to secure your services? Where can they find you other than LinkedIn?
The website is Richwood, Richwood, CG for consulting group.com. And they can find me
Perfect.
there. But
Is
I've
there
had people find me from LinkedIn. Just today, an email popped up. We want you to do an investigation. So I never know.
right?
Yeah.
Well, that's good. A good opportunity that word of mouth is working for you.
Yes.
And also just coming on this podcast, I hope that someone will reach out to you and want to use your services or possibly want to hire you as an executive coach. So I thank you for your time, Elena. But before we go, is there anything else that you would like to share with the Blazers and Brilliance community?
Oh boy, you're putting me on the spot. I think to
I
keep
am.
keep having conversations like this, know that there are people out there who get it, who are like-minded, and that we're not alone. Because so often we can feel alone in this kind of work, not just as women, as women of color, as people of color, as anybody. Um, and to recognize that, and I won't discount people who are not women or people of color because I've been very gratified by some of the support and insight I've seen from people who aren't any of those groups. So you never know. And to close somebody off and say, "Oh, you wouldn't know anything about that. You're not a person of color or whatever." That's not the case. I've seen a lot of insight and compassion and courage from all walks. So I don't want to discount anything, and I don't want to explain somebody and say, "Oh, you wouldn't understand that because of whatever it is." So just knowing
Likewise.
we're not alone. That's the purpose of these.
Right. Likewise. And that's why I like having these conversations. And if you're interested on joining or becoming a guest on this Blazers and Brilliance podcast, feel free to send me a message either on LinkedIn as Leslie Gomez with the IE and Gomez with the Z, or you can send me a message or email at hello@IamLeslieGomez.com. So thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you in either next week or the week after. And I hope you enjoyed this conversation and we'll talk soon. And don't forget to share and head over to YouTube and go ahead and like or subscribe. All right. Have a good evening. Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome.